Welcome, everybody. We're going to give just one more minute as folks enter the space and get their audio connected. We are live streaming as we do with all of our trainings and all of our public meetings, at least so long as the technology is cooperating with us. So in just a few moments, I'll share my screen and we'll get started. If you'd like to take a moment and go ahead and drop your full name and organization into the chat as part of our public record. Thank you, Janelle. Really appreciate you kicking us off there. And then in just a moment, we will get started. Looks like most people are in and connected. Fantastic. Miss Jacinta does have all of us muted. At the end, there will be an opportunity for you to ask questions, but feel free to drop them in the chat as you go or as you have them, and then we'll be able to go back and read all of them. With that, I'd like to turn the microphone over to Dina, our newest team member, to give us just some welcoming remarks. Dina.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. This will be our second training to address some of the expectations or some of the suggestions for the final report. And I look forward to continuing to work with you all. And thank you again for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Dina. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen as we go, which of course is not popping up for me. So give me just one moment. Are you going to cooperate now, Zoom? Yes, you will. Thank you. Here we are. If I could just get a thumbs up from someone that might, if it's showing, fantastic. Thanks, ladies. So we want to, as Dina said, welcome you to our Summer Investment Partners training. This is the second in this month's series. Many of our partners joined yesterday. Some of you might be on here as a repeat. Of course, you're only required to attend one, but this is the third in our total series. So our June session really focused on what the expectations were for your monthly reports. Our July session really focused on the expectations for your final report. And during that session, we talked about the need of one of your contract deliverables, which is to submit a testimonial or an impact story, a success story from what the funding received this summer meant to a member, a family, a child that might have gone through your program or received some of your services. And so what we wanted to offer is a little bit more detail in how to write one of those success stories so that you can truly showcase impact. So what we're going to cover here today is not everything that you absolutely 100% have to do, but rather kind of giving you feedback and input and guidelines for how you do it effectively. Our goal is that when you think about showcasing impact, that you're not thinking about it strictly as a contract deliverable, but that what you do develop for submission to us is something that your organization might be able to use in multiple different ways, whether it is writing a fundraising appeal, whether it's to satisfy maybe a story or some sort of kind of vignette for an annual report. Whatever that might be, we want you to be able to utilize this in multiple ways than just kind of submitting it as, oh, here's the testimonial check, I've done that for the contract. So as I said before, as we go, if you have some questions about how you can utilize some of these techniques that we're going to share, please submit them. And then at the end, we will come and do questions and answers. I also just want to reiterate that what the requirement for your contract is, in fact, to submit at least one testimonial story showcasing impact. Not just in June we did this, in July we did this, in August we did this. That is part of your qualitative narrative that you will be submitting that we did discuss during last month's training. But this one specifically is about how do you showcase impact. And so we're going to give you some tips on how to do that. So the best way of doing that is through something we like to call in the marketing communications business, the art of storytelling. And so we're going to walk you through what that means and how you can apply that to creating your testimonial, your showcase, your impact story from this summer. We're then going to give you some tips and tricks on how you supercharge that story with visuals. And I just want to point out the contract, we're expecting 3 to 5 high quality pictures to accompany your impact story. But we're going to go beyond that, because maybe you want to choose to level up with video production. Video production is not required by any stretch of the imagination. However, if you have the capabilities or it's something that you want to do because you've developed such a great story, we're also going to offer you kind of some of those capacity building tools for you to take it to the next level. And then, as we said, at the end, we will open it up for questions and answers. All right. It is not advancing. Let's try this again. There we go. So we're going to start with storytelling. So just like any story that you watch on TV, go to the cinema for, read in a book, there's going to be a storyline or an arc, if you will. Some people will say that the art of storytelling comes down to the 4 Ps, which is people, place, plot, and purpose. But we're going to take you kind of through a 5-pronged approach to storytelling, specifically how nonprofits can use it. But it starts in the same place that traditional storytelling starts, which is the person. And that's going to be your character. What we want to encourage you to do in thinking about how you showcase impact is to choose a particular family, a particular child, a particular youth that you want to tell the story about. In any story, for you to engage a listener or reader, whatever it might be, you want to give them a character or a point of view to follow. So this gives the audience someone to identify with, someone to care about. It's who they hope for, they fear for, they cheer for. That is kind of like your main character. And just like in a movie or in a book, you want to provide that. So be thinking about someone who's come through your program over the summer, and that might be the kind of like that central character. The next thing that you want to do with that character is to communicate or share their goals with the audience. So this should be some sort of desire or goal that's propelling them forward. Perhaps it's the reason why they sought services through your organization, that they came to you in the first place. And it's helpful if that goal is aligned with your mission, right? So they might have the goal of being an Olympic horseback rider, but if you're a software engineering program, right, maybe that's not the goal that you want to communicate. So you definitely want to have whatever your character's goals are align with your mission statement. The next thing that you want to do is expose the conflict. So this is, and if we're going with traditional storytelling, this is kind of that same kind of storyline where you want to kind of identify the villain, if you will. So this is the villain to your protagonist or to your main character. But in this story, it's kind of identifying what's truly standing in the way of your character from achieving that goal that you've determined. What's the obstacle to which your organization seeks to defeat or help your character overcome? So by communicating that, you're able to move forward. The 4th phase of any good story is my favorite part, right? This is describing the action. This is the climax of the story. This is, the sword fight or the moment when the Wicked Witch is defeated, right? So this is when the main character faces that conflict and with help from your organization is successful. This is where you're really going to describe what it is that you as the organization do specifically to help your character overcome the obstacle to reach that goal. So that's this is really, I don't want to say the meat and potatoes of it, but this is kind of like that moment where you're showcasing that if not but for your organization, the character would not have been able to be successful. Now, many times stories end there, but many times they don't. So if you have ever read a book and everything happens and the war is over, or the conflict is achieved, or the lovers are reunited, whatever it might be, there's always typically kind of like that summing up point, or what we call the epilogue. And in nonprofit storytelling, this is kind of your moment of ending with impact. So in the same way that you might have the epilogue, or you have that final scene where you kind of wrap everything up nice and pretty with a bow, what you do in nonprofit storytelling is how the success story in this kind of highlighted piece means that not only this young person or family was successful, but how others can be as well. This is your opportunity to recognize the partners that were involved to kind of come to the table. This might be a board member, it might be your funders, it might be the CSC Leon, but this is truly that opportunity where you're able to kind of take your story and wrap it up with a nice pretty bow that suggests to the reader, to the audience, if you continue to make the investment of your time, your funds, whatever, that we can anticipate more stories like the ones that we've just heard to continue. So that's kind of this full arc, if you will. Now, storytelling is a very powerful tool because what it does is creates an emotional connection between the cause of your nonprofit and the audience, whether they're reading it, they're experiencing it, whatever it might be. Too often, when we think about success stories, we fall into the trap of just answering the questions and almost rotating into what we call policy speak. And it's not very effective because it lacks that emotional appeal, and it's pretty easy to ignore. I don't know how many of you have ever been to a training or a conference and you get all these great tools, and then you come home from that conference, and where do those tools sit, right? Oftentimes on the shelf. You have all these great intentions of you're going to use them, but it lacked that emotional connection to make you dig in and make a decision. On the flip side, oftentimes we have this kind of too emotional appeal. Sometimes it's related to fundraising. That's usually when we see them out there, are these direct fundraising appeals, kind of these, they almost feel desperate in a sense. Yesterday, I used the example of the ASPCA, that you might see this kind of appeal comes, and there's cats and dogs that are dying. They're so skinny, people aren't taking care of them. And it's kind of this desperate appeal for just pennies a day, you too can be a part of the change. And then it kind of shows you kind of these healthy images and dogs. I bring that up because for some people, it's so in your face, it's such a desperate appeal for money that it can turn some people off, or it makes people sometimes communicate or feel, I mean, really, for just pennies a day, I can be part of that change. And what they end up doing oftentimes is turning the channel or flipping the page in the magazine or keep scrolling on social media, depending upon where they've seen that. So storytelling needs to find somewhere in that happy medium, that middle, if you will, that what you're communicating really is starting with a character, showing them the full arc of their goals and the conflict that they're facing, and then how your organization was able to really provide support so that they could overcome and meet their goal, and then explaining how folks can kind of join in. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with the ASPCA's appeal, but if you're able to find the medium where you're able to draw them into the story and not kind of the shock awe value that some of those 30-second appeals tend to be, is really what we're going for. This is just kind of meant to help you think about and frame that story that you're going to not only share with us, but hopefully find useful as you move forward in building additional partnerships as well. As with the ASPCA, they of course chose to supercharge their story with visuals. Now on the screen before you right now, you might be feeling some kind of way. Maybe this image resonates with you. Maybe you're married and it reminds you of that day. Maybe you're not, and it reminds you of a goal or a yearning that you have for. Or maybe you look at that and you're like, thank God I'm not married anymore. Or I have no desire to be married, right? It may trigger some sort of emotional response in you. The colors, with it being kind of dark and murky, may actually remind you, oh, dark, mercurial, it's a ring, and remind you of Lord of the Rings and My Precious and all of that stuff. So there's all sorts of things that a visual, when chosen correctly, can do to help enhance your story or supercharge your story. We want to talk a little bit about that because we hope that the photos that you choose to submit with your success story, your testimonial, that you're going to go through some of these thought processes for why you're choosing the pictures that you choose, not just a generic, this is all of us at work, and it's kind of like a long range photo and you can't really see what's happening, or a posed photo of you shaking someone's hand. So we're going to walk through kind of some tips and tricks on how you can supercharge your story. And we, again, hope that these tips that you'll use, yes, will help influence your choice for what you submit in your final report with your testimonial, but also to get you thinking about how you can use this in just supporting your organization moving forward, whether it's on social media or on your website, an e-campaign, flyers, etc. So we will start with the first one, which is what I always say, know your brand. For nonprofits, what this really means is know your mission. Keep it front and center. Keep it in mind. You're not going to necessarily use the picture before that I just showed if that has nothing to do with your actual mission. You don't want to choose a photo that's just cool or funny or graphically intriguing. If it fits with your mission, that's what you want to do. You want it to tie to reflect that. If you are providing we just went to an event, our team, I'm going to get it wrong again, books, blocks. No, I forgot the other B. I did it again. But when you, right, there's kids everywhere, they're playing on the ground, they have blocks, they're in the corner, they're reading books, they're playing with toys. That communicates that there's this sense of safe space for young people, that they're able to explore a wide variety of toys and different mediums that they can experience. So that would fit with the story if the story is about going to one of those events and a family identifying a delay and getting connected immediately to services. That would be kind of a great image to include when moving forward with that. So think about that. The second thing that you want to do with your photos is to create an emotional connection, right? So those are key to effective storytelling. That's what draws you in. So when you're thinking about the images that you're choosing, what reaction does it elicit from you? In the same way that I just explored with the ring sitting on the green rock, what reaction did it evoke? Is it, and when if you show your image to some folks, maybe they're partners in your community, maybe they might be members of your team, ask them, like, what does it make you feel? What does it make you think about? And if that's what you're going for, then you've hit it right on the spot. If you're not, right, if it doesn't seem to produce any type of reaction, then don't use it. Just keep kind of searching for a better solution, not necessarily the quickest one. Now, for number 3, this is a well-known photographic technique that we want to share with you for how you pick the best photos. It's called the rule of thirds. So what that means is that you break an image into a 9x9 square grid, or in this case, a rectangular grid. And you're going to want to place the points of interest in the intersections or along the lines. So studies have shown that when viewing images, people's eyes tend to naturally head for these intersection points, even when they're clearly not there, rather than dead center. Negative space, which is kind of that clear space around your subject, helps to draw more attention to that actual image, and it kind of acts as a natural zoom feature or kind of focus, especially depending upon where you're going to be placing this photo. If it's in a magazine, if it's in a social feed, if it's on a billboard, there's usually clutter around your peripheral vision. And by creating your subject matter along one of these intersection lines of interest with negative space, then that helps really bring the eye in to focus on the subject. So that's something that you want to be thinking about as you think through how to kind of showcase your organization moving forward. Again, not only with us, but with the greater community. The fourth thing is something that we like to call avoiding the handshake. And what we mean by this is, don't use stock photography if you don't have to. Don't use photos that are posed or faked. While you definitely kind of want to focus on the face, and that's a saying that should probably actually be on this list. You don't want it to be so forced that people can see right through it, that know it's fake, right? So that's why we like to say, avoid the fake handshake. How many of you have ever been to like an award ceremony, right? And someone's getting an award, and then like they get their award, maybe they say something, and then they go over to the step and repeat, or that backdrop banner. It's called a step and repeat, in case you didn't know. They go right on over there, and there they are, and maybe it's the president of the organization with the recipient of the award, and they're holding it up, and it's this fake kind of pose thing. Maybe you need that for your annual report, but for storytelling, pictures like that, people tend to just go on by, right? The things where you kind of catch them in the action, right? Well, I would say more, you want to capture the moment in the moment, if you're able to do that. And I will say, when we're thinking about pictures, I oftentimes get asked, well, what camera should I use? I will always tell you that the best camera is the camera that you have, right? And oftentimes that means it's this bad boy right here. I don't know about you guys, but I have an iPhone, I think it's a 10. And yeah, this was a pretty expensive phone. So you can imagine that the camera in it was pretty expensive as well. And I have it almost always with me. So when you think through this idea of how do you capture a moment in the moment, that's what you're trying to create. And if you do get those wider angle shots, do not be afraid to kind of zoom in and think about that crop so that you can achieve the rule of thirds. The final thing that we'll share as a tip for really high quality photos is the concept of quality over quantity. So yesterday I totally threw my mom under the bus by sharing this little Facebook vignette, and I'm going to share it again. I love my mom. Yesterday was her birthday, and she has a tendency to really celebrate her grandbabies, and she'll go to birthday parties and she'll take 95 pictures like any good grandma. And then she wants to post all 95 pictures on her social media feed. Literally, there's 95 pictures of my nephew, Alex, running all over the place. There's blurry hands. There's it's like a stretched face because he's not sitting still. And then there's like 95 of those. We do not, let me be very clear that we love it when a partner has a plethora of photos, but we, the CSC, only wants 3 to 5 high quality photos to accompany your story. And we share this not just to say that, hey, only send us 3, and it's not 3 per event, it's 3 for your entire summer program. We put this up here because as you think about how you share your own story on your own platforms, keep that in mind, quality over quantity. If you're thinking about from a social media perspective, right? They even, the algorithm and how it works, well, Instagram will limit you to 10 photos per post, while Facebook allows a whole lot more. The algorithm works in such a way that if you have higher quality and shorter numbers, that those posts will perform better than if you have a plethora with lower quality. So keep that in mind. I'll also say that in print media, right, you have limited space. You can't post 95 photos, right? You can only post maybe 1 or 2 per story. So again, quality over quantity. That's really what you need for meeting the expectations for your contract. A well-written testimonial story, kind of following that arc, making sure that you're ending with impact, and 3 to 5 high quality photos. Try to accommodate these tips that we have shared with you. But should you choose to decide that you are like, I have a great story that I feel really good about, and I want to level up with video production. We're here to tell you that great content is really fantastic to draw people in. They might say, wow, that's really interesting. But if you want to capture the attention of a reader, of your audience member, of a social media scroller, and keep them engaged, video is truly kind of like, I don't want to say where it's at, but like that's where most people are going. I think we all kind of know this, right? Hashtag TikTok taught me, right? We're seeing the popularity of YouTube teaching people things. We're seeing the popularity of Reels and all of that. So there is a way to repurpose your content, this great story that you've developed, into a video story. So we're going to kind of walk through a couple of tips that we would like to share with you. Number one, maintain the storyline. So oftentimes you'll think, oh, I just want to give a teaser or a quick thing into it. Well, if you grab their attention with the teaser, go ahead and take them on the full story, so that you're able to kind of get through it. You don't necessarily have to try to condense it down into a 10-second reel. And that's where you want to really kind of pick a platform for what you're trying to do. Videos don't have to be overly produced to be effective, but they should still follow like all of those kind of things that we talked about before in terms of maintaining the storyline, creating an emotional connection, even considering the rule of thirds. Same thing applies with video. However, think about where and when you're going to use the video. Is it just a share on social media? Is it part of an email campaign that you're wanting to end with that call to action for donation? Maybe you're planning on sharing it at your annual organization lunch. All of that matters because it's going to dictate what type of equipment you should use to shoot the video and how to format the video. So for example, if you're really wanting to do a social media campaign to highlight your story, chances are you're going to want to shoot your video vertically. Right? Why? News feeds are usually scrolling up and down, and even the ones that are going left to right. For example, like with Instagram stories and Reels, sometimes you go left to right. They're still formatted to show on your phone. So keep that in mind if that's where you're wanting to do it. However, if you have this great testimonial and it's shot this way, and then you want to show it at your annual lunch or your dinner or breakfast or whatever it is that you're doing, and the setup in your room is a stage with a microphone and a screen next to you, those screens are not shaped this way, those screens are shaped this way. And it's really hard to reformat a video shot this way to appear this way without having those, what I like to say, kind of the hideous black bars on the side. I know some people are getting more accustomed to seeing that. We're actually even seeing TV commercials popping up that way. But for the most part, right, if you kind of shoot it this way, that's better. I would also like to make the argument that even shooting this way, you can still then repurpose on multiple platforms, right? You can still show video in social media if it's shot horizontally as opposed to vertically, but really kind of thinking through what truly is that delivery mechanism for your video. If it's going to be an email campaign, chances are you're going to upload it to YouTube and then link your YouTube video. Again, most people, when they're reading their emails, it's still, depending upon your audience, it's about 60-40 of people reading them on a computer versus reading them on their phones. So kind of keep that in mind as you're moving forward and deciding what you want to use. If primarily you're going to be delivering a video for consumption on email or consumption on social, then you could probably literally get away with shooting the video on your phone. There's been lots of different videos that I have created right from my phone without needing a video production assistant. However, if you want to communicate, if your video should have a larger audience, or you want a larger scope because it's like a large event, for example, then you might need to, or you want to eventually promote them on a big screen at an event, then you might need higher quality than what you can shoot with your phone. That said, 4K video shooting is a thing. In fact, they're starting to produce entire movies that are shot on iPhones, which is a really interesting concept. But if your scale If you intend for your scale for your video to be much bigger, then you might want to consider actual equipment outside of the phone, and you might want to consider as well hiring in some assistance. The third tip that we'll share is make the first seconds count. So how a video starts, no matter what platform you're using. If it's an email and then they're going to click, if you're at a big lunch or an event, you want them to lean in. If you're scrolling through social, you want them to stop. And what's very impactful is how you start. So think through even how movies today have really changed how they're doing things. It used to be back in the 80s, you'd go to the cinema and you would have your opening credits. So you're sitting there, right? And you're thinking, oh, I can go refill my popcorn. I can go to the restroom before the story starts, because there's usually a couple of minutes of that, like those opening credits. They don't do that anymore, do they? Now, lights go down low. Maybe you hear a rumble of some sort of Dolby digital sound. And then what pops up on the screen is something to lure you into the story. And then it's maybe a 2 to 5 minute sequence or a scene. They close it, then they roll those opening credits so that you know kind of what's there. Why do they do that? Because they want to hook you early. Well, the same rule applies whether you're doing a 45-second PSA, a 3-minute video, or a 3-hour movie, right? The same idea applies. Now, a lot of people will consider, and so I keep that in mind, because the next piece that I'm going to talk about goes into this idea of soundless optimization. A lot of people, especially on social media, especially through email, have their sound turned down low, or maybe even completely muted. So how you start your video to draw someone in absolutely matters. If it's just someone sitting and talking the way I am to you right now, imagine if you hit mute and all you see is someone that's just sitting there. So what I said was that very engaging? Probably not. A lot of people, especially on social media, will take their phones and they'll do kind of these share sessions where they're talking. Maybe they're walking, and you might see them on their stories, and it's like 10 different stories of 10-second stories, and they all look the same because they're just talking. And you have no idea what they're saying because it's not super engaging. What studies have found is that those videos actually are less successful than videos that are communicating, or they're considering that soundless optimization. Something as simple as turning on subtitles, that can absolutely impact it, but also not being afraid to use visuals, to use props, to be in a space where you're referencing something behind you. I saw a great video by a community partner highlighting the Jumpstart to Success event that many of you participated in right before school started. And they were saying, hey, we're getting ready for this event that's going to happen tomorrow. Let's show you what's going to be there. Now, they quite easily could have just been sitting there in front of the video being like, we're going to have this partner and this partner, and we're giving away this, we're giving away this. That's not what they did. They took you on a tour to show you the backpacks and the rulers and the and the snacks that they were giving away, and the erasers. I mean, the pile of pink pearl erasers in itself was amazing. So thinking through how you can use video and showcase your story and kind of take you on the arc, as opposed to, say, interviewing your character and having them verbally give you a testimonial. Think through even talk shows and how you might have your host bringing in someone, and even the back and forth of what they go through. Almost always those effective talk show hosts have some sort of visuals that they bring into the picture, so you can kind of get an idea, even if it was muted, what they're talking about. And the last thing that we'll share on here is visual interest. So in the same way that you want to grab them in the first few seconds, you want to make sure that there's some sort of soundless optimization so that you're communicating. A lot of times that is generated through visual interest. And this is where we want to tell you to not be afraid of video production apps on your phone or the use of special effects or cool filters, because they can in fact make your videos very aesthetically pleasing. Many of them you can do right on your phone. If you have an Apple, you might use iMovie. If you have an Android, there's all sorts of free movie maker apps. And then there's definitely ones that are paid as well. But again, you want to consider the where and the when before making your decision on what to add. A visual effect that you might find in a TikTok filter might be super effective on social media, not so effective on a big screen, potentially. So with that, we are going to turn it, we're going to open it up for questions and answers. And I do just want to, I believe that Sika is with us, and want to just kind of ask her to join and kind of sum up everything that we've talked about, and then we'll go right into questions and answers. I'm trying to let you unmute. Is it working? There you go.
Unmute. Yeah, I have to unmute. Thank you. Oh, it's been that kind of morning. Good morning, everyone. So you have heard a lot of information. I think the thing to emphasize is we are trying to tell a story ourselves about how the funding that you received in connection with any other funding you received helped your participants, your clients, your children, your youth, your families over the summer. And because this is an expansion of programs that were already existing, we want to paint that picture. Ordinarily, you would have helped this many people, and now because of this funding and this opportunity, you were able to help an additional number of people. So when you think back to the story curve that Holly referenced in the very beginning, I'll use myself as an example. I am your participant, and when Sika came in, she was hard on her luck. She didn't know how she was going to make it. Her mental state was not very good. And so we immediately assessed her and put her into our counseling program. We discovered during the counseling program that biofeedback, listen, and I'm not a doctor nor a counselor, but biofeedback and a lot of chocolate was going to help her. She was able to access that on the other side, implemented that, and now she knows exactly what she needs to do to manage her mental state, to know where she needs to go in the future, and to always have a lot of chocolate on the back end. She is just an example of what we did. And so normally we serve this many, 50 people like Sika or in those same situations, but through funding from the CSC in collaboration with other funding that we have, we were able to increase that number by 20 people. And now, what did I say, 50, 70 people have now been assisted by our program. So it's about telling the story of the participant that might be in your program. We want to take those and put those in a final report so that we can show not only council members, but more importantly, the taxpayers that approved for this funding to happen, the impact that it has had. While this will be one-time funding, our cycles will look different as we move into this new fiscal year. We will have lots more accountability and more stringent processes. We still want to show and tell the story of how this council started. It was approved in 2020, started meeting in 2021, and now in 2022, we were able to get $1.56 million out. And this is how many people that money impacted and the difference that it made. So just to give kind of an example of what we're talking about when we're saying, tell the story. You got really some free PR and media consultant services through Holly, without a doubt. And it may be, oh my gosh, I didn't know we had to do a video. You don't have to do a video. You can just simply do the 3 to 5 pictures and make sure that instead of just giving us a caption for the picture, which really doesn't tell us anything, give us the stories that go along with those pictures that depict the program that you were able to expand because of the CSC funding. So I hope that that gives a little clearer picture on what we are trying to accomplish. And of course, if you have any questions, we're all here. So Holly, I will turn it back over to you.
So there are a couple of questions in the chat that I'll pull up, and Robin, I do see you, and I'll ask you to come off mute in just a moment. In the example that Sika gave, a great photo to accompany that might be Sika there, like with her box of chocolates, like sitting, like sitting on a bench or sitting wherever, maybe it's in the counseling room or whatever it is, but that kind of communicates and it reinforces one of the lessons that she learned during the cycle of her process. So you kind of pick up on those elements. But it wouldn't be, like her in like a Forrest Gump moment, like sitting on a thing, like smiling for the camera, holding her box of chocolates. But it might be her sitting somewhere, eating the chocolates or having them accessible. So it's kind of caught in that moment. So that's how you kind of start to think creatively about the use of your images so that you can really truly supercharge that story. With that said, Robin, did you still have a question?
Yes, I do. Hi, everybody. Good morning. So here's my question. And as some of you know, we do anti-human trafficking work here, and we've been having great conversations, interactions, and with this funding have been really linking with a lot of community partners. With trafficking, though, I'm racking my brain because I know what you're trying to do, and it's so important to tell the story, and it's so important to tell the story this way. And so thank you for that free media education this morning. But if we show caregivers or children who we have interacted with, it falls right into what traffickers look for, which is the people who are vulnerable. And the depiction of anybody who's vulnerable, we're writing a guide now, and I can tell you metadata that's derived from that, all kinds of ways that traffickers can literally say, oh, they're helping somebody at the Hope community. That kid is unhoused. And I know, oh, that kid goes to Deer Lake, or that kid goes. So there could actually be endangerment by some of this. And I understand, taking the picture of a back of a child's head, or even that little photo that you showed with the silhouette and the cape. I'm just absolutely flummoxed with how to do this, maintaining confidentiality, and also telling the story that we so passionately want to tell.
So Robin, let me ask this question. And granted, I don't remember all of the nuances of every program that received CSC funding. Am I correct or incorrect in that some of this funding was used to educate employers on how to recognize?
Right, that's our other program, where this is only for work at Hope, and it's also creating a caregiver guide for how to speak to youth about human trafficking so they can protect themselves. You're thinking of our Stack Pro training for businesses, which I would love for you to fund, but no, you're not funding that.
Okay, so understanding the delicate situation that you could possibly be in, okay. I still think there's a way to photographically depict that. So maybe we can get together at the end with Holly to talk about that, because maybe you don't necessarily say where it happened, but there is a way to tell that story, and you have to be able to tell that story without putting anyone in danger, for sure. Maybe that is a situation where we need to use more stock photography that depicts that, but it's not a real person. Maybe it is not necessarily saying what community was being assisted and where that is. So I understand that that's delicate, but because it is the work is so important, and I think it marries very closely with your other initiative in educating employers and the community on how to recognize. They've got to be able to see a visual or something that brings it all home for them. So I think there's got to be a way that we can do it. But truly, because I've worked with you, I understand that concern.
Yes.
And we don't want to and will not put any vulnerable
of
trafficking. I don't like to use the word victims, but I guess it is.
Well,
victims.
it's potential victims, but thank you very much for
potential
that.
victims in harm's
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, thanks so much.
Of course. Any other verbal questions that someone would like to come off mute for? All right, the one I saw in the chat was from Kim. Is there any standard on length of video, both in general and for submission to CSC? So this, again, really depends upon where you pick your platform. So, for example, if you really, let's just say it's your audience is policy focused, where a lot of our policymakers, their preferred social media channel tends to be Twitter. So your limit for video on Twitter is 2 minutes and 22 seconds. So you want to kind of keep it small. Facebook certainly allows it to be longer, and up until about 18 months ago was really favoring videos that were hitting around the 3-minute mark beyond, primarily because they wanted you to think of them first and not Twitter. That's at least my assumption of how Facebook works. However, with the rise of TikTok in the last 12 months as really kind of dominating this idea of short form video and how it almost serves as a trailer to a longer video is something that you might want to explore. On YouTube, of course, you can go any length. Now, here's the question I'm going to pose to you is that if you're thinking about a testimonial video and that you're at, let's say, like an award ceremony, have you ever been at the one where the video goes on for like 10 minutes talking about how great someone is? Now, I'm sure that that person deserves all 10 minutes of being great and wonderful. However, as an audience member, what do you want to do? You want to tell the story. You can effectively tell that story that we just described. Truly and honestly, you can do it in 30 seconds. And this is, I mean, if you do it really, really well and you're able to sum it up, this is why Publix commercials are super, super effective, right? They bring you into a character, they show something, they tug at your heartstrings, they sum it up, and then they tell you to shop at Publix. Like, where shopping is a pleasure. That's where we all know. Shameless plug for Publix because that's where my 16-year-old works right now. I'm very proud of him. But I'm just like, typically that's what we see. And even in commercials, in this type of story where you have more time, and I would really strongly recommend thinking around that 2-minute mark. That way, especially if you don't have a video production company or a full PR firm in your back pocket that can help you script it, right? For someone with kind of shooting from your phone with the folks that you're working with, I think that 2-minute mark is kind of like that sweet little nexus, allows you to draw someone in. It's not too long that they lose interest. Cool, thanks, Kim. Okay, well, I don't see any more questions that have popped up in the chat unless Jacinta or Dina, you saw something that I might have missed. Okay, then I will just remind for those of you who might have slipped in a little bit late that if you have not already dropped your name and your organization in the chat as part of our kind of public record for who is in attendance, then please do so before you leave. We will stop the recording in just a moment, but our team will hang out for a few moments in case that there are additional questions that you would like to kind of pose or follow up things that you might have. And in true fashion, we have tried to keep all of our trainings at that kind of 45-minute mark. I know we're a few minutes over, but I hope that you found that the Q&A session time was helpful as you plan your next steps for how you communicate impact, not only to us,